Something that also appeared in my mind when thinking about thinking is those different ways of thinking, not just whether or not you're emotional or rational, because there will still be different ways of handling and processing, expressing, and relating. And in my own specific case, I might perhaps be a slight bit towards the emotional, but nevertheless usually completely rational. On the third hand, no matter how rational I might be, I'm rarely linear, rather associative, jump from subject to subject, or collect seemingly unrelated things just to extract some basic principle, and this naturally will look like just random randomly collecting all sorts of stuff without any plan, and this of course is completely correct. However, there are quite a few examples of people being a lot more intelligent than myself, having that same kind of structure. What I'm trying to get to is that I'm not really interested in describing my personal way of cognition, but this is one of my reference points, and this might be relevant for specific reasons, because someone may argue that you're talking about linear thinking, but I really see no traces of linear thinking when you're reasoning about it, and that's completely correct. I might also add that someone might be emotional and very much shattered emotionally, while still very linear in when it comes to logic. And also you might be linear while completely irrational. And I made a connection. Maybe this is what made me understand, maybe at least believe myself to having come to some insight. By the name, we probably, most of us, are familiar with this German psychologist, philosopher, Carl Gustav Jung. And he is, to the general audience, associated with personal typology, cognitive functions. And one of his contributions was bringing up this matter of extroversion and versus introversion. And by his definition, this is nothing about being sociable or stuff. It's about how you use your functions, and half of your functions will actually be introverted, while the other half will be extroverted. And if your prime function is directed outwards, then by these definitions, you're an extrovert. You're an extrovert, simply. Which might be the case of mine. No matter how introspective I might be, it seems like, to use Jungian terms, my dominant cognitive function is beyond doubt what he referred to as intuition, which is an irrational perceiving, collecting function. It's nothing that you judge or value things against. It's a way of collecting information. Like some may prefer using their more physical 5 senses. This is like an abstraction of the 5 senses, and like everything cognitive, it's a way of relating and getting a general understanding, more or less accurate, of your surroundings and about yourself. Now, what I'm circling around now, and what I'm targeting is extroverted versus introverted thinking, and on the other hand, extroverted versus introverted feeling. And he would probably explain it's like those introverted functions are more, they're a bit less rational and linear, and they are more especially thinking, more right side oriented, associative, and a bit more actually individual, subjective, even if the dealing with trying to detect a general objective principle. I'll try to explain this. It's also supposed to be like this: if your way of thinking is extroverted, automatically feeling function would be primarily introverted. And this extroverted thinking was one of, according to him, and I might actually agree, one of the most really typically extroverted functions. because it's very much about dealing with the external world, and not only dealing with it, using it for practical purposes, having a practical approach to thinking. What can I do with this? How can we actually build a machine or a structure, or slim the effectivity, whatever. It's very much targeting practical stuff, while introverted thinking is dealing with concepts and theories, logical, general logic, logical principles, and finding the underlying principles, those curry lines of the whole universe, laws of nature, or what's behind things. Further to emotions, I might say that the introverted feeling is about values and getting in touch with your own subjective truths about what is real for me, what feels right, and may also be about actually preaching. This is a moral principle that I would like all humanity to embrace. While on the other hand, extroverted feeling is what you might generally refer to as the more primitive mammal empathetic scanning, getting a general idea of the vibrations into the surrounding. And those introverted feelers are usually very much more typically emotional. They identify as emotional. They're not deep thinkers, but they're deep feelers, because this logical, now I shouldn't say logical, but thinking function is very much more practical. They are not dealing with logical principles at all. Need to say, when it comes to thinking, it's more like getting things done, and their inner world is ruled by emotions, and the concepts of right and wrong might be some streaks of strong contrast, black and white reasoning, and not very expressive until they get the feeling that they're unjustly treated or something, while the extroverted feeler is has her focus spread over the surroundings, getting ideas about what kind of processes are in action. And imagine now that the introverted feeler has this extroverted thinking, and the extroverted feeler has this introverted thinking. So emotional life is a way of dealing with the external world and other people, while logic is an internal matter. It's about processing, finding, comparing your emotional observations with some kind of inner structure. And maybe this first combination of extroverted thinking, introverted feeling is statistically a slight bit more common among humans. It's rather close to 50-50, but I think there's a slight overweight towards extroverted thinking, introverted feeling. Myself, I'm very much to the other side. I've never had any sense of an inner emotional life. Emotions is always aroused by things in the surroundings. Emotions would never become messed up by themselves. They're not really that complex, because they're not within myself. While this logical process can become very much, actually very much messed up, because regardless of the level, IQ and stuff, this kind of thinking won't let go of things as long as there are any kind of contradictions. The extroverted thinker would perhaps not be bothered by this. It's more like a flamethrower, a nuclear bomb or something. It's action, it's execution. While contemplating and such is inner values. The thing is, I've never really, in my entire life until rather recently, the last few years, been aware of this, or it never occurred to me that this might actually be an actual thing, that it would possibly explain some things. Because I was when people have that lack of rational thinking, that lack of logic, I've always considered them being emotional, which still won't explain anything, because this person clearly is very much more of a thinker, very much more intellectual, very much more rational, and sometimes also more linear than I myself am. And how come I might actually be so emotional with regards to this. Why am I seeing some logical principles that this person is completely unaware of? And how come I never get messed up like people like that one, whoever, regularly seems to become? They can't sort things out. And this actually would explain quite a few things. Then I might be completely wrong. Then please prove me wrong. And if you have a better explanation, then I might reconsider this whole complex. But if you can't present any better theory, I will likely stick to this one until then.